Why is it that some people seem to struggle with procrastination and others don't? Some people spin their wheels, they delay, they push the thing back until they just have to crunch and cram and fit everything in. Other people, it just seems to flow effortlessly. Well, in this video, I want to walk you through a very simple reframe, something you can use to help make sure that you are never trapped by procrastination. Again, and as a bonus, you'll be able to avoid all of that inevitably negative self-talk that comes along with it, right? That kind of detrimental internal dialogue is going to go out the window. Now, before we dive in, I want to say that if you are particularly curious to get your body and mind working together more effectively for your business, just go to bodymindclass.com. I put together a deep dive training for you that will walk you through a pretty powerful practice to help weave these things together. But for today, let's talk about procrastination. Now, generally, when people try to stop procrastinating, as soon as you think to yourself, I need to stop procrastinating, you've already dug a bit of a trap for yourself. And here's why. Procrastination, in and of itself, is not a behavior. Procrastination is something more like a category of behaviors. So procrastination isn't just a thing that you can do more of or less of necessarily. What happens is you do more or less of the behaviors that make up this category of procrastination. Here's what I mean. When you are procrastinating, what precisely are you doing? If you want to stop procrastinating, you have to develop a really keen understanding of what it is that you're actually doing when you're doing this category of thing called procrastination. For example, some people, when they procrastinate, they will spend a lot of time scrolling through social media, Facebook, Instagram, maybe YouTube here, yeah. Other people, when they procrastinate, they will eat or drink or distract themselves with TV or whatever the case is. Other people, when they're procrastinating, they'll get caught reading a book. They'll get caught doing more research. Some people, they'll procrastinate by exercising, going for a walk, doing yoga, any of these things. So you can see that all of these different types of people, although they're all procrastinating, what they're actually doing, the actual behaviors they're engaged in, the habits that they have in place, are entirely different. Now, if we tell each of these people, well, stop procrastinating, you can see how it's a level off. It's a little too vague. Because for each of these people, what they do when they stop procrastinating is entirely different. Some people will need to put the book aside. Some people will need to close out social media. Other people will need to just make sure they don't get distracted by TV or food or whatever the case is. So we can see that this procrastination issue isn't something you can simply stop doing. And this might sound like splitting hairs. I should say, if you think this just sounds like a guy getting in the nitty-gritty weeds about the semantics of the words involved, I would understand that. It would be an understandable thing to think. However, what you're making when you try to stop procrastinating is what's known as a category error. You are mixing up logical levels of behavior. And rather than addressing the behavior, which is really the thing that is worth addressing in this case, you're addressing the category of behaviors. And inevitably, when we treat a behavior like a category of behaviors, or a member of a group like the group, we run into all sorts of issues. It's the reason why, for example, most people don't like being treated at the level of a category. We tend to think that those are biased or discriminatory, yeah? If we treat people like categories rather than like people, it's not so fun. Turns out your behavior works kind of similarly. Your behavior doesn't like being treated at the level of a category of behavior. It likes being treated at the level of behavior. So here's what you can do if you want to stop procrastinating. The first thing is to get a sense of what it is you're actually doing in this category of procrastination. Now, there's a really simple practice that I recommend just about every client I work with go through. We call it the little bird practice. What you do is you imagine that on your windowsill, there is a little bird who is watching you day in and day out. And it's a friendly little bird. It's not a judgmental little bird. But this little bird is a very keen observer of your actual behavior. So it's going to keep track of what you're doing day in and day out. And it's going to make note of this. So what you can do, if you imagine this bird on the windowsill, is at the end of every workday, or even if you'd like, you could go through hour by hour, set an alarm on your phone to get a little more granular feedback. But at the very least, at the end of each workday, go through and check in with yourself and ask, what specifically did the little bird see today? What did the little bird see me do? Where did the little bird see me do it? With whom did the little bird see me do it? All of these things are going to help you get a sense of the map of your behaviors. You'll get a sense of the ecological landscape of your habits. And when you begin to become an astute observer of your behavior, seeing what you do, when you do it, where you do it, with whom you do it, then you can figure out what you need to stop doing. And it'll likely be something very different than the big, broad, vague category of procrastinating. Because you'll see all of the little building blocks that make up this overarching habit of procrastination. Now, it's incredibly difficult to change a habit a lot of the time. It doesn't have to be, but it can be quite difficult. So here's what I would encourage you to do. Pick one of these little building blocks of this procrastination category. Maybe the little bird sees that you check your Facebook for 5 minutes, and maybe the little bird sees that you always check your Facebook when you do XYZ. Maybe you have a habit of going right from email to Facebook to Instagram. It's interesting how these things can stack together like this sometimes. But I would encourage you, pick one thing to shift at the start. And as best you can, work toward the start of that chain. So if you know that you have a chain that goes something like email to Facebook to Instagram, maybe back to email again, see if you can interrupt that chain at the very beginning. Now, the way you do it is quite simple. You play a game with yourself, a game that you know you're not going to get perfect from the outset, but you play a game that says, I'm going to see if I can pause in the very first moment that I begin this particular behavior. For example, if you know that email is what starts this whole chain of patterns and behaviors that make up procrastination, well, here's what you do. Every time you go to check your email, you simply pause for a moment and wait. Viktor Frankl has this beautiful line that says something to the extent, I'll paraphrase, between stimulus and response, that's where our humanity lies. So all you have to do at the outset, you don't need to do anything different. All you need to do is find that space to pause between the stimulus, whatever that may be, and your response to it, which would be checking your email. Let's say, for example, that the stimulus is a low-level anxiety. Maybe your body just seems to register some anxiety. Maybe a thought crosses your mind and you're sent on an anxious loop. And your response to that, the way you cope, is to check your email, and then check Facebook, and then check Instagram. All you need to do is when you notice yourself first beginning that particular behavior, pause. Take a moment and see if there's another option available to you at that point. This may seem simplistic. It may seem like not enough to actually make a change, but what you'll find is that if you get in the practice of pausing your habits, finding that first moment where your whole behavioral cascade begins to unfold, if you can pause and inhibit that habit, you open up a window of opportunity where you're able to make a new choice about where you'd like to go from here. So, all of this to say, rather than stopping procrastination, which again is a category of behaviors, not a particular behavior, rather than stop that and go on a wild goose chase of treating your behaviors like categories and your categories like behaviors, instead what you can do is figure out exactly how you procrastinate. Let that little bird watch you for the next week and you'll be amazed what you can discover. Then, once you've got a sense of a day or a couple of days or a week's worth of behavior tracking, then go in and think, what is one behavior that I can make a deliberate effort to inhibit just for a moment when I sense it creeping in. So, I hope you find this useful. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And again, if you're curious to get a deep dive look at how to get your body and mind working more effectively together for your business, go to bodymindclass.com. put together a whole training for you, 45 minutes of an in-depth look at how you can overcome some of these self-limiting patterns in your thought and action.